Okay, so we're going to get
started. Good afternoon. Please take your seats so we can begin. Welcome back. I'm Jamie Wu, Senior Manager for Samsung, supporting the Department of Defense. It is my pleasure to introduce our next panel, discussion on mobility perspectives of the day, presented by the military department's CIO and CTO leaders. Moderating the panel is Mr. Jack Wilmer from the Office of the CTO, Defense Information Systems Agency. Please join me in welcoming Jack and the panel members to the stage.
All right, panel members. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the second to last session, the coveted second to last session spot. I think we're all relieved looking out that there's more people out there than up here on stage. So I'll start out by saying that this session will be made a lot better the more questions that we can get from the audience. I definitely want to try and target our comments to provide feedback to the things that are of interest to you all. So as we get started, I want to start out by introducing the panel members. Closest to me is General Farrell. General Farrell is the Army CIO, CIO G6, and in his responsibilities, he reports directly to the Secretary of the Army, sets all Army C4 and IT functions. He oversees the Army's $10 billion in IT investments, and specifically to mobility, his organization is responsible for the Army's mobility strategy, all the way up to basically the procurements, which are then procured through the various organizations within the Army. Mr. Frank Konechny, to his right, is the Air Force CTO, for the Office of Information Dominance and CIO, Office of the Secretary of the Air Force. And similarly, on the Air Force side, Mr. Konechny is responsible for the Air Force mobility strategy, mobility policies as well, to ultimately inform the roadmap for the mobility capabilities. To his right is Vice Admiral Ted Branch. He is the Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Information Dominance and Director of Naval Intelligence, as well as the Navy CIO. And again, his responsibilities in the area of mobility are for overall guiding Navy efforts in mobility, developing policies. He's the resource sponsor, and again, the overall mobility strategy for the Navy. And to his right is Mr. Ken Bible, who is the Chief Information, I think you're the Deputy CIO of the, so you got promoted on the paper, that's exciting. Deputy CIO and Director of Command Control, Communications and Computers for the U.S. Marine Corps. Similarly, he's responsible for the mobility strategy all the way up through the requirements, and I think one of the areas that Mr. Bible is going to focus on are some of the pilots that the Marine Corps is currently executing in the mobility space. So what I'd like to do is get started for each of the panelists to give a brief overview of what they see as their mobility challenges and how they see mobility leading innovation in the future. So if we can start out with General Farrell, and then we'll work our way down the panel.
Okay. I'll go ahead and stand up and walk around because that light is bright. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I think today is a twofer for me, because with AUSA, I'm hosting a Hot Topics panel there in Arlington, Virginia today. So this afternoon, I told them I could not miss being here about mobility. Because for the Army, I'm not sure what, like the other services, we have a long way to go when it comes to mobility. A lot of initiatives, but we still have a long way to go. When you look at a goal of our Chief of Staff, General Odierno, one of the key goals is to untether the soldier so it can have freedom of flexibility to accomplish his mission regardless of the location. And when you talk about that and look at how he maneuvers today, he's hardwired to a piece of equipment. And so that flexibility, that mobility is not there. So mobility is really a key to kind of get at that goal for our Chief of Staff. And again, as you look at that, what do we need when it comes to in the mobility sphere for the Army. One, we need that suite of mobile user devices that are interoperable, if you will, that in that range and distance with our partners. That's one key area that we need. We need that information available for that commander to make that decision, regardless of the situation. We need to receive and send that information on the fly. It's not about the amount of information that we need. It's really about getting the right information at the right place at the right time to make that key decision on the battlefield. When you look at our plan, we're looking at trying to move to that commercial acquisition model, if you will, off-the-shelf innovation, new technology to kind of enhance what we're doing from a modernization effort. Long way to go with that because, as you know, when you look at the acquisition process, it's not as fast as we want it to be, but again, that's kind of the direction that we would like to go when it comes to the mobility piece. When you look at what we have as an Army, I think in January, I released an Army campaign plan that really provides a roadmap for near-term and mid-term that highlights all the mobility pieces and parts that, along with the other modernization effort that the Army needs, again, to move towards what we coin as JIE, that Joint Information Environment. We also released a cloud strategy document in March of this past year, all tied to security, mobility, that provides, again, just an outlook of the direction of where the Army is going. And we're getting ready to release our policy towards the end of this month to kind of provide that guidelines for our users within our formations, again, to purchase the commercial provider for hosting some cloud technology. When you look at what are we doing now in the Army, one, we are informed by our Army operating concept. That's fight and win in a complex world. That is deploying elements with little to no notice to any austere environment and to be teamed or networked with our partners. And again, from a mobility side of the house, that is truly a key ingredient that's a must-do that we need to kind of tackle. And when you wrap that into, there's also some security aspects that are part of that. When you look at some of the programs or pilots that we have ongoing, we have one that's initiated at West Point, where we're testing on moving their data off their, of course, moving their data off their laptops into a cloud service type capability. And we look at, we also have another pilot working with the Corps of Engineers. They're looking at trying to figure out how can they capture data automatically on mobile devices. And we also have one other mobile initiative, and that's with the recruiting command of how do we capture, again, with that recruiting command that's spread out throughout, the CONUS, with those recruiters that is not, is touching those folks and providing that data. How do we automate that from a mobile device environment? So those are three just quick examples that we have in a pilot form. And then when you look at in a tactical space, of course, WinT is the tactical system of choice, and two pieces within the WinT, of course, is it's Net Warrior, as well as the HMS Radio Manpack that really provides the radio and data requirement for the soldiers that's on the battlefield. When you look at what we need from industry, one, we need your innovation. I had an opportunity with others within DoD to go out to the West Coast, to Silicon Valley with Mr. Halverson and many others. We had the opportunity to meet about 19 different companies, and the key thing that we talked about was interoperability. And we talked about size, weight, and power. We talked about common standards. And we talked about really, in our world, in the Army, we're too reliant on satellite. How can we get at, again, maximizing that line of sight and reduce that burden on satellite communication? And so again, those are just a couple things that I want to share with everyone, mainly to whet your appetite. And so I will turn it over to my next partner.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to sit here because I've had a busy day all day, and I'm sure you guys have a busy day too. The Air Force has had a mobility strategy. We produced the first mobility strategy about 2 years ago, and it had 4 basic steps. Most of it was getting your framework together as opposed to anything else. We're currently revising it in our flight plan. In fact, we had a conference this week at AFCEA to actually look at the challenges that we're going to have moving forward. And we're going to have another strategy planning session up here in Washington with all the MAJCOMs. And you may say, I wonder why we're doing that. And the reason is because the Air Force developed their own mobility strategy at the MAJCOM level based on functional responsibilities. The A4, the logistics branch, has thousands of devices. And I do mean thousands. They have thousands of iPads, they have thousands of readers, they have Wi-Fi readers, they have availability to actually connect, you like this, they have ability to actually connect to the outside world to actually do 3 quotes for a particular part, but then they have to enter it back in another facility to actually order that part. The community has grown up in a viewpoint of functional need, and you're going to hear we need the right data for the right people at the right time. I think we're all going to say that.
Nah.
No, okay. Maybe Ken won't say that. But, it comes down to that in many issues, that we need to do that. And some of the strategies that we're going to view right now are, what are we doing at the base to actually support this Wi-Fi concept? We do Wi-Fi, we may do private LTE. We need to figure out a way of mobility on the base, especially at the flight line. Because we found out that Wi-Fi is really cool, but it's not on the flight line. And the logistics people actually need it to do maintenance and everything else there. It doesn't go that far. So we have to put in private LTE or something else to actually get that far. The other thing, too, is that we want to be able to develop apps on a common mobile framework. And we've been looking at various vendors of how to do this. Should we do a VDI? Should we do a web-based browser concept? We are working with various pilots to try to figure out the best way of doing this, because we want to be able to bring the apps to the airmen, and in such a way that we want to be able to give the airmen the right device for what they have to do. I mean, you hear that the Air Force has generated lots of iPads, probably 30,000 or 40,000 now, iPhones all over the place. It's because they've been using them for particular functional purposes. But we want to make it in an enterprise viewpoint that we need to have those devices for more than one function, more than logistics, more than everything else. Personnel could be using those devices too. It's just a question of how to do that, and how to do that in a secure manner, because that's one of the concerns, of course. Do we actually connect this through LTE to go out to come back into it? Do we actually connect it to the NIPRNet while it's on base? What happens when you take it off base? These are the factors that we have to push into the equation of how the strategy will actually work. Now, probably our biggest challenge is we have lots of devices right now. We have barcode readers, we have chip readers, we have everything, because logistics, we have tons of iPads, some old, some new now. And the question is, how do we connect those, like with LMRs and everything else, into one solid mobility strategy that everybody can talk to each other? So that's where we're working right now. Should this strategy consist of all this connected together, and how do we share information better? The other point is also the authentication. Now, we authenticate, on our desk with CAC cards. That's really cool. When you're in the field, it gets a little bit messier. I'm sure Ken will talk about that one. But, we do rescue operations too. We are out in the field. They're not carrying their CAC cards around, nor a CAC sled or anything else. So what do we do to authenticate in? Do we do biometrics? And what should those biometrics be? Should it be something else? Because we talked about, user ID and password is really interesting, but it's not secure enough to do some of the applications that we want to be able to have, and those mobile devices. So part of the strategy is to look at how authentication is going to work across the board, and do we want to have different, if you authenticate with a biometric in the field, you get the same data as you would authenticate with a CAC card within the office. And we have to figure that out. That's part of the mobility strategy.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll walk. I'm not sure on the last panel of the day that I'm going to say anything that's fresh or new that you hadn't heard already from someone, but I'll give you I'll take a swing at giving you some perspective from the Navy point of view. First, I need to correct the record. I do have a Fitbit. I don't have a watch.
The Apple Watch.
As was mentioned in the last thing, and I do have an iPhone 6, as a matter of fact, that the Navy bought me. I guess, actually, I bought it for me. Yeah, I thought so. This is an effort to advance the ball, really, and for the Navy, this was kind of the bleeding edge for us, and we learned a lot with my iPhone, and the fact that I had it, and it was making me be on the bleeding edge, moved the ball a little faster than perhaps it would have, and the goal was to have the CNO not be on the bleeding edge also, but he experienced some of the same issues that I did, unfortunately. So, best laid plans and all that. The Navy's, but this is a good thing, and I'll talk more about this in a minute. The Navy's mobility strategy, as Dan Del Grosso was saying earlier, is to be able to access information, access data, anytime from any place with any device. That would infer that we would get to a point where we would have a bring your own device kind of scheme, and we will. The degree to which we'll have a bring your own device implementation is something we'll determine as we get down the road on our strategy. It won't be everyone bringing their own device, and we'll have government furnished devices, but we have areas in our service that just lend themselves, the Navy Reserves are a good example, that just lend themselves to having a BYOD kind of construct. If we can get the security right and get a containerized solution or whatever we need to make that work for them. So that's one aspect of it. As Dan also said, we have a number of initiatives, a number of pilots going on. The iOS device, leveraging the engine contract is one field that we're working and fleshing that out. eSailor is another. The vision with eSailor is the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy's vision. And that was to have a new recruit at boot camp show up at RTC in Great Lakes, Recruit Training Center in Great Lakes, and be issued a tablet. And on that tablet would be everything that he or she needs to do their training in boot camp. And it would be Wi-Fi compatible, and it would have an email account on it, and it would have some kind of toggle function that during the work day, during the work week, they have their training materials and they use it for their training. And then at periods of time when it's okay for recruits to write a letter home, they would be able to have the Wi-Fi, the email enabled, and email home or Facebook or whatever they want to do. That's significantly better than what we were doing there, where we have a millennial, a recruit come in, 18 years old, and we take away their iPhone 6, when they get there to Chicago at Great Lakes, and we put a pencil and paper in their hand and they say, "What's this?" Because they'd never used a pencil and a paper. They've been digital natives the whole time they've been literate. Anyway, that's a step in the right direction. The follow-on to that vision is the recruit takes that same tablet with them and they go to their next follow-on school, their A school or whatever, and it gets uploaded the courseware that they need for their next A school, and it gets more capability on the private side of that device. Similarly, they take it to their first command, their ship, their squadron, wherever they go, and they have that functionality that they need on the device to do their work, and it might include a preventive maintenance system check, for example. We have to go out and do a clean and inspect on this pump or some kind of maintenance, preventive maintenance on a piece of gear. And so on that tablet would be the instructions. Instead of having a stack of paper to tell them how to do that maintenance, they'd have that all in their tablet, and maybe even a YouTube video that showed some other sailor doing that maintenance to get them through a tough spot. So, that just kind of is intuitive. It makes sense, and it's a good way for us to go in the Navy. With the additional aspect of having that have a personal side of that device to allow that sailor to be able to use that device and to connect with home or social media or whatever they want to do. To be able to get there, the Navy has a somewhat unique issue with the other services in that we have to go to sea on ships, and so we have to make these devices compatible with going to sea on ships, whether that's Wi-Fi or not, and then how do we get the connectivity off the ship through the satellite back down to the terrestrial layer. So that's another area that's very much in work now with Navy Mobility Solutions, and that's how we're approaching Wi-Fi via our Consolidated Afloat Networks Enterprise System, CANES, on the ships, which has a limited Wi-Fi capability. How do we explore expanding that envelope and capability, and then how do we make it secure enough to use? Right now, as we speak, there are tablets in reactor spaces in submarines and aircraft carriers that are being used for that kind of work. On a Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, the reactor plant manuals are a bunch of brown-bound volumes that take up about this much room in a bookshelf. So having that information on a tablet is very beneficial and efficient for the workforce in those spaces. And the ability to update those drawings and instructions and technical specifics online is much more efficient, obviously, than trying to do it to the manuals themselves. So, you know, it makes a lot of sense. Again, it's very intuitive. It makes a lot of sense in the direction we're trying to go. The rub in all of this is how do we secure it, and how secure does it need to be? I note today the absence of many cybercom, NSA, cyber warrior kind of folk. I'm sure there are a few, but I hadn't seen many, and I haven't heard any while I've been here. But that's where the tension is in our business between those of us that are trying to expand the aperture, expand the envelope, and do more mobile, faster, and the authorities that are responsible for the security of the networks and systems, and to a degree putting the brakes on and making us think about it another way. Someone in the panel before made the comment that there's a predisposition to say no, or at least there's a perception of a predisposition to say no instead of a predisposition to find a way to yes. And I think that's a cultural thing we need to work through, particularly for unclassed mobility. I mean, certainly when you get into the higher classifications, you know, it's straightforward that we need to be more careful. But for unclass, I think there is a balance that we can strike where we're accepting risk in an appropriate manner. I will tell you that a firm proponent of mobility and mobility in the Navy and pushing that envelope is John Richardson, the prospective new Chief of Naval Operations. And so if he's confirmed, when he's confirmed, I think we'll find that the Navy will get even more traction and try to push ahead even faster in that area as we go forward. And I'll wait for your questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Admiral Branch. Mr. Bible.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm going to stay seated too. I'm like Frank. I had a big day. Thanks for the opportunity to come talk to you today. You know, a lot of what we've heard from my colleagues on the panel applies to the Marine Corps as well. I will say that perhaps the one subtle distinction is this idea that the Marine Corps is trying to go work towards a single network. The Marine Corps Enterprise Network is a single network flowing from the garrison out to the deployed arena. And that's necessary for us to be able to maintain the operational tempo and really meet the need as a crisis response force for the nation. So we really have to think about how do the things that we choose to put in place support that. That said, in garrison, we kind of look at the mobility world as really two distinct environments that we need to work on based on mission and the financial or fiscal alignment. In the garrison-based communications, it's focused on the NIPRNet, and in the tactical arena, it's focused on the SIPRNet. Now, I'd like to spend time today really focusing in on that garrison side, because that is probably where we have the biggest potential for impact in terms of numbers. So today we have GFE commercial mobile devices that we provided to individuals whose commands have deemed them as mission essential or mission critical. So that's about, I use the figure between 13,000 and 15,000 users. I think it's probably closer to 15,000. But there's over 234,000 Marines and civilians in our ranks. So that means that 94% of our Marines and civilians are not mobile enabled with any kind of official capability. And that's what we're really trying to change in the near-term strategy. Our Marine Corps commercial mobile device strategy has actually been out since before I came on board as the Chief Technology Advisor, my previous job with the Marine Corps in 2013. That one identifies our goals and objectives that will work us towards that mobile workforce. And I will say that's out on the web, so anytime someone comes to talk to me about mobility, I ask them if they've read that strategy document. And I think my Army colleague over here mentioned the cloud strategy, and I actually look at our private cloud computing environment strategy as being very complementary to that commercial mobile device strategy. So I encourage you to read both of those and see how they fit together. We talk a little bit about, that's part of the challenge, getting to that 94% that's not mobile enabled right now. I also think a challenge is the fact that our Marines are extremely entrepreneurial and always thinking about how to innovate. You want to see something pretty neat, go look on YouTube for a video of an application from DARPA called Kill Switch, being used to do precision close air support from a V-22 Osprey to a ground unit, identifying a target and shortening the timeline to do that close air support mission from 30 minutes to 4 minutes. That's the kind of speed with which Marines are coming up with new ways to use these devices. And I'll tell you, if we don't keep up, they're gonna keep on innovating. So my goal is to make sure that we're supporting those Marines and that we're staying at least on par with them. I hope that I never outstrip them. I hope they'll continue to bring new ideas and push us every day.
Great. Well, since we seem to be alternating standing up and sitting down, I'll stand up to ask the next question. Looking out at the audience as the panelists have spoken, I have not seen a whole lot of the BlackBerry prayer with people staring at their devices, so I hope that doesn't mean that you haven't been submitting questions, because I do want to make sure we get a chance to get to those. But first, I'd like to have the other panelists kind of pull the thread on something that Admiral Branch touched on in his remarks, which is the bring your own device strategy. There's a couple different strategies and basically specifically how it pertains to your service. So the notion of corporately owned, personally enabled, where you'd have a container, like a good container or something like that, or a personal and a work profile, a bring your own device strategy where the actual end user purchases the device, the data plan, et cetera, but then connects to the corporate information from there. So what I'd like to do is start out with Mr. Bible and then have each of the other panelists address how your service is considering or not those different types of strategies or approaches for bringing mobility.
Sure. Thanks for bringing up the bring your own device strategy, because one of the goals of our strategy is to enable that volunteer use of a personal authorized device to gain access to that Marine Corps Enterprise Network. And we've been looking at a lot of different container solutions to do that. And a lot of the work that we've been doing, it isn't yes, there's a lot of technical work and we can talk about that, but I'll tell you that probably some of the hardest work that Rob Anderson down here in the front here with C4 has been working on is the BYOD user agreement and the rules of behavior, which explain what the Marine Corps can do on your personal device, looking at that device, and cannot. And alternatively, what the individual civilian Marine or Marine can or cannot do inside of that corporate container. And there's a lot of work around that and trying to make sure that we're protecting the rights of those Marines to the privacy of their personally owned device while enabling a secure solution for the corporate data. A lot of good work in trying to survey the workforce and see how they would accept that and see what their attitudes were with respect to that. Just some statistics here that I brought out, and Dr. Ray Latier from our cybersecurity branch had been compiling the results from this survey. 24% of our respondents had GFE devices, so probably a little bit more of those privileged users than the non-privileged. But 64% of those used their personal device for USMC business, for Marine Corps business. 64% were using their personal device for Marine Corps business. Now, usually when I'll have one of these forums, I'll ask people, and if it's a government audience, I'll say, how many of you used your personal device for government business? And since some of the national press has come out, the hands are a little bit lower. But in the past, it was like 90% people would hold their hands up because most people have done it. And so we're trying to understand that if we don't provide them with a secure way of doing work on that personal device, we're probably asking for trouble. They're going to do it. 84% of our survey participants would use their personal device for Marine Corps business. That's if we gave them with a secure solution. Let's see what else I have here. 95% were interested in gaining access to government email and calendars, and 74% were concerned about data charges or overages. So just some of the statistics coming out of the, and I remember having a lunch and learn session with our folks, and one of the big concerns, one of the admin folks said, well, I manage the data plans for our family, and I'd be really upset if you ran over my data plan because of government stuff coming onto that container. So these are all the kinds of considerations that we've had to work through in this, sometimes more so than the technical challenges. I don't know if that covers the answer, but the BYOD is a critical piece of making it so that we can get to that 94% of our population.
I think Ken said it very well, and it's the enabling the user who otherwise wouldn't have a government-furnished device is the whole goal of BYOD. Anecdotally, our data tracks along with the Marine Corps. Most people, when we were issuing BlackBerry devices, the Navy has about 30,000 BlackBerry devices out there, most of which will be replaced by either an iOS or a Droid device soon. Most people that carried that device also carried a smartphone of some kind. And they did that so they could have Google and Facebook and, and Skype or instant messaging or whatever they wanted on that kind of device that people grew accustomed to and demanded to have. So it was an issue of either carrying two devices or finding a way to get down to one. And invariably, everybody wants to get to one, but they want to have one that does everything. So I mentioned I was going to talk about my phone some more. So on my phone, I have a container that does government business. And, the degree of security of that container, I guess, is debatable depending on who you talk to and which agency they're in. But for unclassed business, in my view, it's good enough. The other thing it enables me or anyone else to do is have a camera that works, Facebook. I can, iMessage with my mom. You can do the things that you do on a regular phone. That's a very attractive thing to the workforce. So would an individual who already, oh, by the way, has and pays for their own personal phone, would they, for the convenience sake, opt in to get government business on that phone? Most of the time, the answer is yes. So, I think it's not a question of if we're going to do that. I think it's just a question of to what degree we're going to do it and making the distinction between those that the Navy feels like we have to provide a device to because it makes sense and those others that will allow to opt in to that device. And as I said, some areas of our population, it just makes a whole lot more sense than others to do a BYOD approach.
Okay, we've looked at it for about 2 years, and we looked at what commercial industry was doing with BYOD, and we looked at what the federal government was doing at the same time. And it's really a question of, will the user accept the restrictions that we put on it based on the device and also the types of device? Because we say we're going to put a container on it, but the container is only good for certain types of OSs. So we'd have to restrict out the phone that the person could actually utilize this with. We'd also have to restrict out how you're going to bill. Billing is a big issue. Mm-hmm. I mean, data plans are one thing. I don't know if the Anti-Deficiency Act gets in there at the same time, if they're paying for stuff that we haven't allocated to them. So we may get into that issue at some point in time. The other issue is that the contract that usually the feds put out and everything else says, I can take your device at any time and I can clean it, especially OSI. Because if you have a spillage on your device, it's gone. They'll take it and crunch it. So if you agree to that, and I haven't found many airmen who will agree that I can take their device or I can wipe it clean somehow and I can be cool with it, And that's the same problem they had with the feds. The feds were spending, theoretically, the same amount of money to manage the device than they would before, so the only thing they were cleaning up was the cost of buying the device. And that was about it. And that's what some of the feds found out when they were doing this. And so it'd be nice if we could do this in such a way that we could do security and everything else. But the question is, we have to get through these particular hurdles of security as well as billing, as well as employee agreements and things. You know, and some vendors I've talked to say, well, we can clear everything out of that container and no problem at all. And you talk to some security people and they say, well, that's really cool, but we don't believe it. So we have to get through those things, those hurdles first before we would say, okay, you know, we're going to let you bring your own device because of the restrictions that we pretend or we believe is going to actually be there.
I believe you will have similar stories here with the Army. One, as you listened to the Navy, talked about their handheld device having the capability of both unclassed for your personal information as well as the military information. The Army has similar capabilities. In fact, I have the same device, and we've put out a policy from the actual DoD ops to allow units to purchase those mobile devices only on official business. We have not opened up the opportunity to commingle your personal device because, again, it gets into security, it gets into, again, billing. There's lots of legalities that we still need to kind of sort through on that. But the goal is, again, from an Army-wide, is to open up that opportunity to allow the units from an official side of the house to purchase those mobility devices and any device agnostic, if you will, to kind of register on top of the official email system.
Jack,
So if I can get my dime back just for a second, maybe you're going to have yours soon. Everything he said is absolutely correct, and that in one school of thought is the problem. And everything that was said was at what I would call the extreme of the legalities and the procedural issues, with the requirement to take and break your phone, and the requirement to pay a stipend to buy data, and the requirement to do all that. My personal opinion is if we can get the right lawyers engaged, we can massage those rules or even amend those rules. You know, taken to an extreme, the Anti-Deficiency Act would have the government paying for my phone bill because I use my telephone for government business, you know, and that's absurd. So there are, a goal in the mobility effort is to get past the absurdities and decide where the real line is that we need to walk, but not be bound by rules that were written,
I agree. Yeah.
many years ago before we had this kind of technology.
I guess, and Frank, Admiral, exactly. I mean, we started out from that point, the extremes of it, and I think that was the big struggle that Rob spent many hours in my office complaining about lawyers and our discussions about what were the right strategies to take on. But I think what this offers up is that for our industry partners to really think about the offerings. How do you come to us and how do you help us prove that that container is secure? How do you prove that we can wipe that container without impacting upon the personal data on that device? It's not an unachievable thing. I think we've got some of our folks from the Warfare Center down in Spaywar, Atlantic, that did penetration testing for us, a good bit of penetration testing. And we actually broke some of these containers, and I won't mention names of them, but the industry took them back and went to work on them and hardened them up and came back with better solutions. We'll need your help on that. On the billing side, we'll need some help. And how does that work if we're going to offer something as a service, mobility as a service? So I think those are things that industry needs to take on board and think about how they frame their offerings, because those will be factors that we will have to go bring into any kind of effort we take on to use your services.
And we've talked to some people, some industry partners that are talking about dual SIM devices now.
Sure.
Or maybe a virtual as opposed to two physicals. And that would solve the building problem.
I'm hoping, though, that we can avoid that piece because, as you pointed out before, I'm trying not to, what I want to try to get to is device agnostic. I don't want to prescribe what device you get. If I can get the container that can operate on whichever OS that you choose to get and whatever device you get, and I can secure it, then I take that out of the equation. That has a whole lot of benefits for me, not only on the BYOD side, it has a lot of implications for me on the tactical deployed side of the house when I'm talking GFE, because I can start to unhinge the application
Yes.
to the device
Yes.
kind of problem that we deal with, Frank, you were talking about earlier. Because I have that problem too. And until we offer that kind of solution where we can make it agnostic, we're going to be buying all kinds of different gear for different functional purposes. And there's no reason for that. It's just a function of nailing down the requirements for this security on these devices.
That's great. Thank you very much. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to the voice from above for the first question from the audience. I understand we have a few queued up already.
Okay. First question, could you please discuss information sharing with coalition partners to the panel as a whole?
So obviously we'll take that from a mobility perspective. And Frank, do you want to touch on that first?
Yes, I guess so. Mobility-wise, okay, this comes to us all the time. You know, I have somebody walk in the door and say, I'm a mobility partner and I need to use some equipment. This happens in reality. And not so much MPE, let's talk about, first responders, everything else. That's where we get into it a lot as to how we actually communicate with them. And I think that, we as we do the strategy, we are looking at, going forward at how we would actually interact with mobility across the partner space. And it's not, and we have to think about it in terms of two ways. We have to talk about it in, I'll go back to the access control pieces of it, because you have to authenticate accordingly. We have to have some way of knowing who you are, and also we have to know what data we're giving you and why you're giving the data. So as we talk about mobility, we also talk about, IDAM controls and everything else associated with that mobility. And then we have the device issues, and we have the telephone issues and everything else, depending on where you are. Because as you know, U.S. telephones are different than European, and we have to channel that. But that's a totally different, that's a technology issue that we have to solve at some point in time anyways.
That's great. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
Well, the key thing that I would tell you that really is of interest is really not the device, it's really the standards. Having common standards that we can kind of at least build towards. We tend to focus more on devices more so than common standards, and then what is the policy associated with that when it comes to our coalition partners. So those are two nuggets I'd like to add to that.
Yeah, I guess I would add a couple thoughts. I think Frank said it on the head with respect to things like a Centrix network or a coalition type network issues. If you take those off, and that's a little bit different problem, but think about this secured container, and I can remotely manage what apps are available to the container on that device. And if I have something that's carrier agnostic, what's stopping me from putting a secured container on a coalition partner's device and just allowing them to subscribe to the apps that allow the sharing of coalition data? A whole lot of issues that have to be nugged through to make that a reality. But it's certainly probably a whole lot easier problem with our, say, our contractors or civil authority relationships and the interaction with them. But just from a device perspective, figuring out, I think, this container-based approach opens up a lot of avenues.
Yeah, and more of a policy, really more of a policy releasability access issue than a technological challenge. The technology is there, and JIE Increment 2, when it builds out, I mean, one of the key focus areas for that is interoperability, coalition interoperability, and partner usability. So I think that will lead us, that effort will lead us down some access paths and perhaps streamline some of those processes and make it more able to do mobile.
No, thanks. And I'll add one thing, I guess, from a DISA perspective is one of the items that we are looking at now is with our DMCC, our classified capability. starting to look into what would it take to be able to issue those to coalition partners. And so the exact items that were brought up before, whether you're talking interoperability across networks, things along those lines. So where we have a device that we believe is sufficient to be able to pass that out, but kind of that next level down of what does that mean when you're talking about making phone calls. They'll want to be able to have the interoperability with the U.S., but also be able to have the stuff private within their own countries, et cetera. So those are some of the items that we're starting to grapple with on that line as well. Next question, please.
Next question to the panel as a whole. HSPD 12 is a requirement in mobile that has gone largely ignored today. What is being done to enforce the standard on a mobile device? At what level does this need to be enforced, device, container, app, or all three?
So I think I'm going to change the question, and I appreciate that question, but where I would like to focus is an aspect that we talked on a little bit before. And so one of the pre-canned questions we had is where are you going in the area of derived credentials? I think taking even a step back from that and some of the things Admiral Branch touched on, where is the department going to go in terms of your identity on the device, how you authenticate to the device, things along those lines. So if there's anything specifically within your service, if you want to touch on the HSPD 12 aspect, feel free. But I think more from the perspective of an identity and where we're going to try and go to be able to ensure that you are the person that's using your device as you authenticate back to our networks and back to our systems. So Admiral Branch, if you could begin by expanding on some of your thoughts in terms of maybe what the Navy's current initiatives are.
Okay, right now we're striving diligently to comply with the requirement to use CAC-enabled authentication and PKI, and it's easy to do ashore. It's harder to do afloat, and it's harder to do with combat systems, weapon systems, and I'm sure the other services have the same thought. As far as specific to mobility, there was discussion before. Everybody's seen the CAC sled that goes with the BlackBerry. You know, it's clunky. You can wear it around your neck. It's not very fashionable, and it's hard to use. So it was unpopular, and people didn't do it. People would work around it. They just wouldn't encrypt and sign their emails. An approach is a thing that looks like a cell phone case that you put your CAC card in, and then you can do signed and encrypted emails right there on the device. That's better than a BlackBerry sled, better than, in my opinion, better than an appendage that you stick into your smart device and swipe your card or leave your card in it and have it hanging out. But that's still probably not as elegant as we need to get. So at some point down the line, the technology, I think, is going to support having good enough authentication that's Ted Branch's phone and I'm Ted Branch, that I ought to be able to do that without a CAC card. So whether or not that's biometrics, whether or not it's my eye scan, whether or not it's some other kind of derived credentials, I think is work yet to be done and proven to the security folks in the world, but clearly a direction we need to go in.
And I do believe that answer likely applies across each service, but if any of the rest of you have anything you'd like to add,
Sure.
Chime in.
Since the 30th is working on derived credentials for a while, and we actually can put derived credentials on a phone, the real question is the secure password store on the phones adequate enough to support the derived credentials, or do we have to have little containers on those phones to actually support those credentials? And then there's another question that we always keep coming up with. If I'm using a derived credential, and the way we do it right now is it gets me into the phone and everything else. Okay, that's really nice. However, if I'm having mission apps sitting on that phone with you, I want to you authenticate every time you touch a mission app. And the derived credentials don't necessarily let you do that per se. They let you in. So, you know, if the Admiral here actually logs into his phone and I knock him on the head, I get all his stuff.
Yeah, right now.
Right now. And that's not what we want to be able to do. I want to be able to, when you know, you go to an app, to have the authentication some way or a PIN or something that we have, which is the same experience we have with a CAC card, but we want it to be without a CAC card.
Yeah, that might be one of those kind of things we've got to think through from a doctrine training type thing, but or have it with the time limits and such. I mean, the Marine Corps is definitely driving after this derived credential construct. And I got to salute the Air Force. They've really taken a lot of good things and done a lot of good work there. And we've copied a lot of that into what we're trying to do with the derived credential world. But Frank points up a really key point. It's one of those other things that we need industry's help with is proving the security of that derived credential inside that container. And we're going to have to prove that to NSA, and that's going to be perhaps a little bit of a lift, but I think we got to do it on a risk-based approach, but that is a significant concern. But once we have applications that live inside of that container with that derived credential, then the applications can access those credentials, and maybe it's a timing thing in terms of their authentication.
We have to figure it out, yeah.
Right. Could they knock you over the head, and that could happen today before you could get your CAT card out.
You just
right?
have to.
I think our challenge is working through the policy pieces of this. We're going to implement the approved DoD CIO solution when it becomes available, but we're trying to push it with the infrastructure that we have and the authentication systems that we have today. And if we find that Marine Corps or DON or DoD policy is precluding us, we're going to come try to figure out how we change that policy. We can't wait.
Well, I'm surprised my Air Force partner didn't talk about the little pilot that he has ongoing, because I know my favorite three letters in the Army is AKO, and then that's drifting to the right, and then how do we come up with a solution set to kind of replace AKO? So I know my Air Force brother to my right, partnering with him. You want to share anything that?
Well, we talked about enterprise level security as the access control system to actually do this more effectively. We can get into large details about that whatsoever, but that's not the point. That's not this presentation panel. But we can do that some other day.
Okay. All right.
And I think that, you know, as I listen to this, and a lot of the perspective is, a lot of it comes back to industry as well. So tying back to that original question on the HSPD-12, the reality is what we need to do is find secure ways to do authentication, to log into devices, to prove we are who we say we are in a user-friendly manner. Because the reality is that, as was touched on in a number of topics from BYOD all through this, is that if it's too cumbersome to use, people won't do it, and then they will be even less secure than the alternative. And so I think, go ahead.
No, add on. It's that, but it's even in terms of how do you go push the credentials? How do you put the credential on the device?
Yep.
Because industry has to think about that process piece, right? Because there's going to be a point in time where those very valuable credentials that deal with really crucial certificate information is kind of hanging out there someplace, and we need to know and be able to look at your facilities or look at how you're doing that and give ourselves a level of comfort that that's happening in a secure fashion, and that if that certificate is, if that identity cert is living out there in the cloud someplace for some period of time, that once it's down on that device, it's blown away in your cloud. And that's probably going to happen inside a FedRAMP level 4, level 6, or level 5 facility, level 5 facility in the end analysis. So but think about that when you're talking about your offerings or thinking about your corporate offerings, because we've got to understand that process. And this is getting at the crown jewels of identity for DoD.
That's a great point as well. So let's open up to the next question.
Question for the panel. Can the panelists discuss mobility on and past the tactical edge, and what efforts are ongoing in this area?
The question was if for each of the panelists to discuss what their services are doing in terms of mobility at the tactical edge. So
I know we are working, NSA has just approved some common standards for a 4G Wi-Fi capability for TOCs. And so we are testing at the NIE now of how to make a TOC, you know, again, 4G compatible and remove all of the wiring inside of our TOC formations. So that's one key area that I think from an Army side, it's a very new and game changer for us.
thanks.
Well, the Air Force Tactical Edge is really a base. So it's not, except for when we do rescue missions and everything else, so our Tactical Edge is really not really, you know, the Army is doing a lot, and the Navy and Marine Corps are really out there. We are supporting them, but in the air more than anything else. And so when we talk about Tactical Edge for the Air Force, it's more of, you know, rescue missions and everything else out there, talking with, you know, firefighters and everything else, getting the LMRs connected across the, you know, the response squads and everything else. That's what we're doing. And basically that's part of the strategy as well. It's how we're going to link all the devices together and how we're going to do authentication with those devices and know that the people that are there are the people that we believe can see the data. That's basically our strategy.
Thank you.
I think fundamentally for us, it's, or the biggest part of that effort, Tactical Edge for Navy is afloat. So the biggest part of that effort for us is our work in the CANES environment with Wi-Fi and tablets and how we can leverage those tablets for use in the afloat environment. That's probably the best example I have. There's some pretty specialized capabilities for special warfare applications and other things that are really not even in my purview. That's not in my lane. They get their own work. You probably have some of that too.
Yeah,
but for Navy, big Navy, it's about CANES and how we're leveraging CANES for mobility afloat.
And I want to kind of break the tactical piece in a couple different layers. I mean, we've got the tactical pieces now that we've got special purpose MAGTF crisis response that are kind of land-based elements that from which we are deploying out smaller company level teams, 2,000 miles downrange on various missions. There's certainly a land-based component to it, but I don't want to diminish at all the fact that the Navy and the Marine Corps fight as a team. This naval integration piece coming out of 10 years of land war and getting back on ships and figuring out how as a Navy and Marine Corps team we do things. That's got to weigh into this, and that's some of that GFE device type stuff that I was talking about when I talked about the difference in the two buckets of things that we're thinking about in mobility. But from a pure Marine Corps gear perspective within the tactical space, we're down to where every squad leader is going to have an IP-routed ground-based radio system. They're going to have a radio network. So if we can envision every squad leader with a commercial mobile device communicating with their peers and up the chain, this is going to assist us in clearing up some of the fog of war. It's going to get tremendous capability. And to me also, this is about, in an energy terms, you talk about that company level team getting on the back of a Osprey and flying 2,000 miles downrange. The last thing they need to be worrying about is where they're going to get another 55-gallon barrel of fuel to power a generator to charge devices. Right? So anything we can do to knock down that form factor, to knock down that energy demand for that company level team is great. And I think mobile devices fit into that picture.
Thanks. I think we have time for probably one question left, is my guess.
Yeah, question for the panel as a whole. What is the current unified comms tied to the mobile strategy? So how are we going to bring together unified comms within the mobile strategy?
Anyone in particular dying to lead off for UC and mobility?
I don't know. We can put Link in that secure container and we can all be talking with each other.
Or something like that.
Or something like that.
I guess I'll start off and buy a second at a time, and there may be nothing after what I say, but my perspective is that the whole aspect of UC is being made available on any of the different devices wherever you are. So it's trying to have that unified experience of communicating. So exactly whether it's Link or any of the other technologies that do that. And I think mobility is just one of any number of form factors that should support that. So that's absolutely, mobility is something that we're considering in our UC strategies. But at the same time, there's not going to be a tailored, UC for mobility is my perspective at least. All right, we'll do one more question then.
The last question is a rather long question, so I'll just summarize. As all the DoD is here in the size of the DoD, is there any effort to try to consolidate the buying power of the entire DoD service together to leverage the power that we have as a unit?
I mean, we do that already with the telephone connections. I mean, we do that. I mean, we have various BPAs associated with buying comm. So we're doing that already. We haven't done it on the device level yet. I mean, we have our own business agreements with the providers, but other than that, I don't know if there's...
Yeah, I'll add one thing, I guess, for context, is that a lot of what you heard is people are exploring what are the different strategies, for example, BYOD versus, the traditional model, et cetera. And so I think that my gut feel is that as we center on a strategy and get, dare say agreement, but at least a consistent perspective in terms of what that right answer is and how we're going to move forward in procuring devices, et cetera. Admiral Branch mentioned a transition from the current solution to different OSs, different types of devices, and so I think that right now each of the services and ourselves as well as an agency are really looking at what is that next answer, where exactly do we want to go, what's the right ratio of devices, things like that, and I think that's generally a good idea to come up with an answer to that perspective first, and then look at how do we consolidate our buying power behind those answers. All right. With that, I think I'd like for you guys to thank the panel. Really appreciated each of the perspectives.
Thank you, Jack.
How you doing, man? How you doing? I'm well. I'm well. Yeah, I sent you an email that you need to respond to. Ed wanted to come on Monday.
Okay, so I started to say, I'm just going to let, we're just going to let
So I'm also a member
Yeah,
of the
all right.
AFCEA Mobility Working Group. It's my privilege to introduce our closing keynote speaker. Today we have the honor of hearing from Lieutenant General Ronnie Hawkins, Jr., Director, Defense Information Systems Agency, and Commander, Joint Force Headquarters, Department of Defense Information Networks. General Hawkins leads a global organization of military and civilian personnel who plan, develop, deliver, and operate joint interoperability, command and control capabilities, and a global enterprise infrastructure in direct support of the President, Secretary of Defense, Joint Chiefs of Staff, combatant commanders, Department of Defense components, and other mission partners across a full spectrum of operations. Please join me in welcoming Lieutenant General Hawkins to the stage.
Thanks a lot, man. We appreciate it. Thank you. Well, good afternoon. I've done one of these before where Mr. Halverson has asked me to come on at the tail end of it, and I swore at that time I wouldn't do another one. And the reason is, it's not because I don't like him, but it's just I know I'm the last thing standing between you and the traffic jam that's out there as well. And I don't want to belabor the time, but I do want to close with a couple of thoughts and comments that are near and dear to what it is that we do within the Department of Defense, but more importantly, what we do within the Defense Information Systems Agency. I would open up by sharing with you a couple of comments that I made about 3.5 years ago to be exact, when I first came in as a director of DISA, and we were down in Tampa, and we're giving at that time we were able to call them the conference that we were having down in Tampa, and I stepped out on the stage and said that I believe that we within DISA are going to be doing mobility at the enterprise level within a 2-year period of time. And we're going to be able to do it at the classified level as well as the unclassified level. And we have the type of professionals in the agency that have been able to accomplish that feat at this point in time. And in fact, we're going to be doing it at the top secret level on mobile devices within the next couple of months. I believe we're supposed to deliver our first iteration in our DMCC device in the September-October timeframe, that we will be putting out a mobile device where you can do top secret capability on it. What that does and what that says is what I would call the quantum leaps forward that we have done in this area of collaboration. And when I say collaboration, I would share with you or would posit that it is about the data that we are sharing across the board throughout the Department of Defense, whether it be at the business level or the warfighting level. Give you an example at the warfighting level. We have a 4-star combatant commander that has already delivered a requirement that he wants to be able to use high-definition, full-motion video on his mobile device. He told us about that about a month and a half ago, and we believe by the end of August he will be able to get that type of capability on his mobile device, secure on his mobile device. And the reason behind that is because, again, he was at an event and other opportunities were taking place some halfway around the world, and he was required to make decisions and was not able to do so given the environment that he was in. But he was holding on to his mobile phone and was asking, how come I can't do it there? And so we've all have heard about the requirements issues. We all have heard about the need for us to secure the mobile device, but I would tell you, I think the technology is there and I know we're not in the BYOD business right now, but the technology is there that it shouldn't be about the device, it should be about the data. It should be about securing the data and using whatever device that you have at your disposal, quote unquote, and being able to share the information, whether it is within the Department of Defense, whether it is at the coalition perspective, or whether it is at the business side. We should be able to use those devices. The fact of the matter is we do it today, and we do it not necessarily with impunity, but we do it with the belief that what we're using our device for in our personal lives, it is secure, one way, shape, form, or fashion. I would tell you that the situations that have occurred with some of the understanding of the breaches that have taken place in the past couple of weeks, I believe those types of situations are going to get us to where we are securing the data in an efficient and an effective manner, faster than any of us even think about right now. And so I would ask that we move away, not that we can right now because of the rules that you heard the august panel talk about just a little while ago. We move away from looking at this in securing the hardware, and let's get at using the hardware for what it is, and that is just communication tool. And give you an example of where I'm coming from. We have our phones in our house, and they went out for whatever reason this past weekend, really this past Thursday, and because we had the 4th of July weekend, we weren't able to call anybody out, and I'm not going to name who our provider is, but we weren't able to call anybody out to come look at the phones and find out what was going on in the house. And so when my wife was able to do that this past Monday, the company checked the phone system, checked all the way through the house at an office. I don't even know where they were at, but they said it has nothing to do with the line coming into the house. It is something inside your house. And the only way that you're going to figure that out is you need to take a phone that has a cord that plugs into the wall and go outside and go plug that into some jack outside, and you're going to find out whether or not there's really a problem. Well, our first problem was finding a phone that had a cord because we didn't have those in the house, really. We have just moved away from that type of capability. And where I'm going with that is I think we are not the oddball, if you will. That is just the norm all over, and it's the norm within the government as well. We have moved to the mobile ecosystem, one way, shape, form, or fashion. And so it's not about that hardware, it's got to be about the data. We've got to be able to secure the data. By the way, we did go find a cord, and we ran outside, or I ran outside in the dark of night and plugged it in, and sure enough, figured out it was because we had the phones plugged in incorrectly inside the house. So we went through that process of elimination and figured it out. The truth of the matter is we've got to do the same thing in the Department of Defense. I shared with a group of people about a week ago, talking to at an intelligence forum, and was telling them that there are 3 laws that I have always looked after as the director of DISA. One is Metcalfe's Law, Moore's Law, and then the other one is the law of disruption. And when I talk about the laws of disruption, I am talking about all of the different rules and regulations that impede us from getting our jobs done and getting them done right. And so the technology is there, the capabilities are there, the laws are not where they need to go. And again, the group talked about that just a moment ago. I believe we are at that point in time as a result of, again, things that have happened, that the laws are going to get changed. They're going to have to change in a dramatic fashion and pretty quick. And as a result of that, that's just going to open up the mobile ecosystem that we're dealing with right now. And so my challenge to industry is help us determine the right type of technology that we need to secure our data, wherever that might be, at the enterprise level, and let us use whatever device we need to use. Again, we don't, absent going to a couple of foreign countries, we don't turn in our device when we go to a foreign country. We get the capability and we just use it wherever we are at. And we need to do the same thing in the department. We have the people, the men and women within the Defense Information Systems Agency to do that. I believe Ms. Kim Rice was speaking to, did you speak today? You did not today. If Kim Rice was speaking to you today, she would have told you all of the things that we have done on the unclassified side as well as the classified side, where we are going with our capabilities at the top secret level, how it is that we are teaming with the NSA, how it is that we are teaming with the services to bring in their different appliances, and I say it that way from the perspective of their different mobile devices, and put them into an ecosystem behind a mobile device manager. Right now, that is the architecture that we're using to do that. Maybe that's not even the right architecture for the future, and we've got to get together with industry to get there. And so we're excited about what it is that we're doing. We're excited about where we are going, and most importantly, we're excited about teaming with industry to get us there and make that happen in short order. I applaud what has taken place. I'm excited, again, for what Mr. Halverson has got us on the path to do. But most importantly, I'm excited about being out there the next time that I sit in one of these areas, because this is the last event that I have on the docket to be speaking while wearing a uniform. And it has been a wonderful ride in the United States Air Force and within the Department of Defense at the joint and coalition level. But I know that we've got the people in DISA that are going to just carry this through to the end, and we're just going to go out and explode what it is that we're doing. I look forward to your questions that you might have, a couple of those, and then again, we will not stand in the way of you and getting home on the Beltway. Questions?
Thank you, sir. Can you please speak to what you see as DISA's role in the future of mobility?
I believe we ought to remove the services from everything they do. No, not really. It is all about the enterprise, and the one organization that can provide that infrastructure at the enterprise level and provide it to where apps as well as devices can connect. It's the Defense Information Systems Agency. They've only been doing it for 50 plus years, and they do it very well. And I believe that's what DISA's role will be in the future. It's about providing the architecture and the means with which to move that information wherever the soldier, sailor, airman, marine, civilian, contractor, whomever it might be, that's part of the Department of Defense, federal government would utilize.
Uh-oh, there we go. Sir, last question is, you talked before about the importance of securing the data on the devices. Can you please describe your approach to managing security needs with bringing additional operational capabilities onto mobile devices?
Yeah, if I said secure the data on the device, that's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say is secure the data. Where the data resides is a different story in and of itself, and I think that is something that needs to be decided as well. And so, again, if I went down to secure the data on the device, please forgive me for doing that. Obviously, you got to secure the data. Whether or not it's containerized or whether it's a thin client type of a capability that we use that device for, that's a different story. And so from the security perspective, that's where I am going when I say secure the data. As far as the objectives for what it is that we would deliver for the warfighter. Whatever apps they might need, they can download those as well on that device and use the device for that capability to communicate with each other, authenticate. The derived credentialing that we need to get to is one of those areas as well, what we need to be able to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We really want to go. All right. Again, we thank, on behalf of Mr. Terry Halverson, I thank you for your attendance at this event. We appreciate AFCEA's involvement and teaming with us to make this the positive event that it has been. The feedback has been tremendous and positive from that aspect. We look forward to doing this in the future. But again, I look forward to being out there, hint, hint, with somebody else doing this at another time. Thank you very much for your time.
Hi, folks. Before people leave, just a couple of closing remarks. First of all, thank you to General Hawkins, I think, is due. And then also I'd like to announce the winners of the Passport Awards, or, people got their technology showcase stamped, and we did a fair draw backstage, and I'll announce the winners now. So if we could change the slide. The winner of the Blue Armor 100 Secure Handset by BAI Mobile is Ann Sears. Ann, just like the rest of the folks, pick that up in registration before you leave. The winner of the BlackBerry Passport from BlackBerry is Erica. It's Erica Olympiou. I think I've got that name right. Apologies if I didn't. The Samsung Galaxy Tab 4 from Good was Noel Richards. $50 gift card, Casey McCarthy, and the Samsung Level box was Cecilia Fan. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to remind folks to please save the date, October 7th, 2015. We're looking forward to another terrific event. I'd also like to just say a couple of things about AFCEA and the DoD working relationship. Cecilia Fan, I think, did a terrific job of organizing this, and Ryan Fetterman also, wonderful, lots of work to help us organize this. I'd also like to recognize Randy Clark, who is the chairman of the AFCEA Mobile Working Group, for huge dedication and heavy lifting. And then finally, Will Alberts, contractor to OSD, who for many, many years now has been, in my estimation, the thought leader on mobility and continues to shine the light. And Will, I really think, did a lot of the heavy lifting. And if I didn't say it before, Nuclear Rubel from Connolly Works, who is pregnant, 6-7 months pregnant, and got here at 5:45 in the morning to just do a wonderful job. And without Nuclear, we would be nothing. So wanted to say that. And then I also, please email us, Randy Clark, Randy Siegel, others. Go to the AFCEA DC website. We would love to have members of industry and government join us. We're very lucky to have lots of folks, Verizon, AT&T, Microsoft, Apple, Samsung. It's a great venue to have cross-team collaboration and to also hear from the government. We've been lucky to have Rob Anderson and Mike Hernan and many other good people. So finally, the last piece is on behalf of the Mobile Working Group, our good friends at Samsung are sponsoring a happy hour on the 8th floor. So it's not super complicated, but go out this way, go to the left, go to the elevator, go up to the 8th floor, and drinks and good times from Samsung. So that would be the end of the event, and thank you very much for attending, everybody. Thank you. Thanks.